Welcome to another podcast of Care at Scale. My name is Greg Reiners, and I have the wonderful pleasure of welcoming my guest today, Alex Soto. He is the co-founder of Patient's Eyes. And in this episode, we have the opportunity to walk through Alex's story. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having it.
And I really am going to enjoy this conversation with you as your scenario and your life scenario and the way it's played out since you actually came to mainland United States is very different than anyone else I've spoken with yet. So I'm excited to build the foundation of where it all started and how it's lent itself to where you are today, which is a co-founder of Patient's Eye. So
Sure.
with that being said, I always bring about the first of the first, which is where you actually came from Puerto Rico to the United States, in this case, Florida. But talk a little bit about how Puerto Rico transitioned to Florida and how that really, because I know that scenario of a very different cultural life and then coming to Florida was probably a beginning piece of this whole story.
Yeah, so luckily for me, I was very young when we came. So my whole life or memories are US, in Florida. My parents, like every other immigrant story, came from Puerto Rico to the US, looking for work, looking for a better life for our family. And that's really where it stems from. Our parents, coming over, you know, having to work really hard to support a family of four children, two teens and two newborns, pretty much, because my sister and I are back to back. So all I remember from them is just working hard to live the American dream.
And then American Dream started in the west coast of Florida, in Naples.
Yeah.
And at the time was certainly a very affluent area and continued to grow in that sense. How did that time frame of growing up in Naples develop into the personality you are here today?
Man, it's a huge environment change coming from the mountains of Puerto Rico to a growing city in the state of Florida. Where we're from, we're Naples, and from when we came in here in 97, it's grown drastically. I mean, when we lived here, there was still a forest ranger station right down the street from where I live now. And now it's all just a booming companies, and it's just changed completely from then to now. So just growing in that environment was just, constantly growing and growing.
Mhm.
So you got to grow with it.
Well, you do. And you grew right into out of high school, and one of the first positions you took out of school was equally tied back to some of the technology that we'll talk about. In a
Yeah. Yeah. Straight out of high school, I got recruited to work for Verizon Wireless repairing phones. And that was my first glimpse of hardware that I got in repair, building phones from parts. I fell in love with hardware engineering ever since.
And they probably did a really good training program of walking you through not only the clientele, but what you need to do as a service person or working with the equipment or just helping to provide that level of service to your clients, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you got to think about this. Back then, there wasn't just two major brands of phones. There was at least 12 different brands of phones. Each brand did things differently. Having a phone back when I started working was kind of like identifying yourself. You had the Nokia phones, the Motorola phones. So the phone really dictated who you were. So there was tons of different varieties of phones. So you had to learn how to repair every single type of one. And they were all different.
Yeah, I'm gonna look forward to wrapping back to that part later on. But then this thing called COVID hit, and
Yeah.
you were like everyone else, couldn't engage with or be around other people, and so Verizon changed to the opportunity. We'll put it there as to a new line of work. And what was that?
Yeah, so I went from running businesses in the software space, in the fleet management space, to having to work in a psychiatric unit due to the fact that that's the only place that was hiring. When COVID hit, a lot of technology companies took a major hit. So unfortunately, due to the reasons of COVID, I ended up working on a psychiatric unit and a crisis stabilization unit for that matter. And, from there, I just saw how many implementations of technology could be done. And that's where I just fell in love with the idea of building something for that space.
Tell me a little bit more about the actual psychiatric ward, because not all are the same, and depending on the state, it equally is not the same. So, what type
Correct.
of patients did you have in there? What type of clients? what was happening in the ward that you were working in?
So the facility I was working in was this crisis stabilization unit. So we primarily dealt with what in the state of Florida is called a Baker Act. So those are people that are there involuntary due to the fact that they are either deemed a harm to themselves or others. So they are what's called in the state of Florida Baker Acted, and they are there for the terms of, sometimes 72 hours, depending on, the case.
Well, involuntary is very different than not
Very
voluntary.
correct.
And tell me a little bit about that experience of just participating with each of them and how it really opened your eyes to the difference in facilities and difference in healthcare. Like the psychiatric facilities are extremely different than any others.
Yeah, yeah. So I went in there thinking I was going to work at a hospital. I'm going to wear scrubs. I'm going to go walk around and check on patients. It was a eye opener for me. It was not that at all. There's some serious situations that people find themselves in and they just don't know how to deal with them. And sometimes they lash out. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes, they just want to be left alone. So learning all of that took months for me. How to identify somebody who just wants to be left alone, how to identify somebody who needs somebody to talk to. So those first couple months were culture shock for me, just like huge eye opener. But once you get past that, you start seeing, they're just humans going through very bad times.
And how big a facility was it?
So the facility I worked at had 3 primary units. We had a adult crisis unit, a children's stabilization unit, and then we had a detox facility. So between the 3 units, I'd say over 100 beds.
And I asked that question because as you look at the difference in the type of patients, and you just went from adolescents to adults and detox, that each of those segments are very different in how they're dealt with and equally how it's documented, which we'll lead into as well. But you were very much exposed to the whole spectrum of what is needed. And in your case, as you walked around, what wasn't available, and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how what you witnessed some of your colleagues doing or not doing in that matter.
Yeah. So, I mean, I quickly rose through the ranks, as you would say, in the organization that I worked for. So I found myself going from just a normal tech to the elite tech very quickly. Then switching over to the children's crisis unit, which again, completely different. Kids are very, very intense sometimes. They're just learning how to handle life. So learning that was huge. But a lot of things that we would see was just the misappropriation of, learning how to do the processes of following the procedures and just the lack of technology in the space. Very underserved by technology.
And so what were they doing?
Well, it's not so much what were they doing, it's what weren't they doing. So what we would notice was a lot of times you'd see technicians who are just there to collect a paycheck. Because again, it's COVID time. So there's a lot of people that are looking for an easy job because they're not in the field that they want to be in. So you'd see people sitting down watching TV for an hour or 2 at a time and then backlogging all the locations without actually doing the rounds. So you would see patients not being monitored for hours at a time.
And were they using paper to document?
Oh, yeah. Clipboard and paper. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So there was no accountability for their actions or
No,
whoever was
none
managing
whatsoever.
it, unless they
Yeah.
witnessed it or were turned in.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And nobody's going to turn anybody in that's going to turn the place into a hostile environment already. A hostile environment into a worse environment.
And the patients at the time were the ones that were suffering as a result.
Correct. Yeah. So there'd be times where we could have caught something that, whether it was a customer that's going to spiral or a customer that's, their care is degrading. We could have caught that if somebody was actually doing their rounds on time, how they should have been.
And so it was the basis for so much of where patients' eye developed into is what you witnessed in that time frame. How long were you working there?
So total about 3 to 4 years.
So you had
Yeah.
full exposure of what
Yeah.
was
Yeah. I had full exposure to a lot.
And at some point, you decided that you were going to move on from there, but moving on from there with something in the back of your mind the whole time. So how did that develop?
Yeah, so once I left there, I left with the idea that I had to build something to kind of remedy that because my background was in IoT. So I knew that we could easily develop something that can actually serve and help in that space. So I had a lot of families that was in that had alcohol issues, that had dependency issues, and knowing that there's such a lack of technology and it could have easily been served with a quick little app. It was just, nature kicked in. I started doing what I do best, was working with technology to try to fix a problem that I saw.
It took a few years to start that process.
It did. It did.
Where did you start? The hardware, the software? Where did it develop?
So I learned how to program and I did the first iteration myself, which that took about a year and a half to 2 years, just that part. But then I remembered that I had a couple good friends that were in the programming space, that were in the development space. So I partnered up with a company called developers.net, and they really took my dream into reality within months, which I should have started with that.
And so the software's now live, right? And
Yes,
now
sir.
you're able
Yes.
to see it in action, and they work through all the processes and logistics internally to make it a product that can be marketed.
Yep. Yeah. So we took it from a dream to a reality. We quickly got the hardware manufacturers on board. We were able to not only get the platform up and running phenomenally, flawlessly on HIPAA compliant AWS servers, but we were actually able to, within that time frame, get a customer that had multiple facilities, start deploying it and testing it live with them at one facility, and go. We went from there, started scaling and scaling.
Now into the nuts and bolts. So we just talked about how they were using a clipboard. 3 to 4 years, you witness all these people not being accountable per se, and it's not everyone, but people not being accountable. Now you've brought on a platform that does what with Patient's Eye?
So what we've done is we've really digitized the rounding, but we're actually taking it one step further. We're automating it for facilities that can do it. Because again, it depends on regulations and the laws of the states. But for facilities that can use technology to automate those, we do full automation with AI. So we deploy the beacons, we deploy the hardwares for the patient bracelets and everything, and we automate it to make it a lot easier to let the techs actually focus on the patients, focus on working with the patients. But for the most part, we took and designed 3 separate products from one. We did the digital clipboard is what we call it, where it's all digitized, it's all digital, so they don't have to go back and paper log anything, file nothing. It just automates the whole process. We have the digital rounding with the bracelets. So we have Bluetooth and NFC capable devices that work with Android or Apple devices. And then we have the automation where the whole system's automated with AI.
Very cool. And people can't see the technology, and I would encourage them, as I'm talking with Alex Soto from Patient's Eye, to go and look at the type of technology that's available. Tell me more about the bracelets, because as I looked at the different types of bracelets, which is the technology that identifies the individual as well as keeps track of them, how did you pick what it is and how it is and where it works into the software?
So for us, it was very important to be hardware agnostic. The reason being is some facilities already have devices that they own and they don't want to start all over with a large investment because, like I said, a lot of these facilities don't have a lot of money to invest to begin with. So when they do make an investment, we want to make sure that we can, if it's a device that we can easily integrate, we have the development power to do so. But what was important to us was just finding devices that we can, one, or either reuse for organizations that aren't, in crisis mode, what I call it. But we also wanted to find devices that were cost effective because, again, care in the US is expensive. So we didn't want to add another expensive piece to the puzzle for the customer to have to pay, the patient. So what was important to us was to actually make it cost effective. So the devices that we picked, the manufacturers we went in with quality and care first most, but then cost. We want to keep cost down.
And it sounds as though that you have reusable as well as disposable. And
Correct.
how do you identify that based on price, based on the patient, based on how do you quantify or qualify that scenario?
To be honest with you, it just depends on the level of care that the facility's doing. For example, one of our customers that we have is a high-end detox facility. So for somebody like them, we did integration with the Apple Watches because they provide Apple Watches to their patients when they come in. It's a higher end facility. We're testing other equipment like the Aura rings and stuff like that. But it really depends on the facility. Like on a crisis unit, we're definitely going to go with a reusable device. We want to make sure that we get alerts if the patient takes it off or they tamper with it. We want to make sure that, it is, you keep in mind some of these patients do want to hurt themselves or others. So we have to take that into account as well. So those are things that with every device that we deploy, we go through a huge vetting process. Is this going to be safe? Is it going to be good for the unit? What are the ramifications if something were to break? So it goes through a huge vetting process. And luckily, we have a good CTO that is really nitpicky with the hardware. He will not take anything but the best.
I'm really glad you described that a little better, because this is a scenario and a location and life scenario place that can impact the individual, but also, life altering, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that are happening in their rooms that are unique to them, unfortunately, but also you need to make sure that whatever you're providing to the facilities is going to fulfill expectations. And it sounds like you go through a rigorous expectation in that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You have to. You have to. Because at the end of the day, somebody's, life on the line. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to make sure
And
that.
and it is truly their life, and
Yeah.
that's why they're in there. And this is to ideally help them. So speaking of helping them, part of the software you had explained to me does just that. It's not just the bracelets, but it also opens it up to a lot more of their daily routine and requirements.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's great to collect the data, but at the end of the day, what are you doing with the data? So what we've done is we've created reports and dashboards that not only allow the staff and the admin team to see what's going on with the patient, what they're doing, logging the required stuff, but it's also allowing the doctors to go in and use that to evaluate the patient as well. So a typical scenario, somebody's coming in, they're depressed, they have suicide ideations. Those people are kind of going to be by themselves. They're going to try to hang out in a room, stay alone for the most part. But as you see them transition to start going to group, to start eating more of their food, to start hanging out more in the living room, day room, instead of being in their room by themselves, secluded, you'll start to see that the care that you're providing is actually working. So providing that data, using that data as asset to the facility is huge for patients.
And so now the data is uploaded into their system or in something that works in their EMR, so they're able to evaluate and have the statistics associated with each of the patients, which before was the clipboard and or a summary document that someone was manually doing.
Correct. Yeah. The doctors would have to literally walk into the unit, ask the tech, hey, how's he doing today? Now they could just log in. Oh, look, he ate 90% of his lunch. He took his medicine. He showered. He brushed his teeth. He talked to mom, made an outgoing phone call, whatever. So the level of documentation that we have it started as location, just basic tracking. But as we started seeing the needs, we just started adding more features and adding more tabs to the application.
Can the physician actually track where the individual went throughout the day? I mean, does it
Yes.
go, it gets that granular?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they know if they were in their room or if they were spending time
Yeah.
outside of their room or what they were doing.
Right.
Because back to when they're asking the tech, the physician now can automatically see what happened throughout the day, not just based on medications and eating, but also how their activity did.
Yeah, we actually added a mood tracker as well. So the technician can add, hey, he's in his room, but he looks upset. He took a phone call from mom. He's mad. She went to group, came back in early because she was upset or whatever. So there's a lot of data sets that we're tracking with our app.
Is this where the Aura Ring comes into play? So you can track your.
Eventually,
Well,
yeah.
I find that funny because, did you sleep well? My
Well,
family members.
eventually we will get to that level. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we went to see CES this year, and the level of technology that's out there, I think within the next couple of years, we should be able to track that kind of data.
Well, first things first, right? Like, let's just start with the technology and get going with the basics. But I mean, those Aura rings, that's people want to know, did I sleep well? I'm like, well, did you feel like you sleep well? No, I bet you didn't sleep well. And you know what the Aura ring tells you? Exactly that. You didn't sleep well. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but there's other clinical reasons that would tie back
yeah,
into that. And as you're saying, yeah, the technology continues to become less and less expensive, which drives itself to being better for a clinical purpose. So So now we've got a software platform with Patient's Eye that's tracking, allowing for clinical information, telling what's happening with the patient. How is it being received by the physicians and staff that you're now have the product and software being utilized?
So in this space is very much brand recognition. So it has taken us this time to, get the brand out there, get the groups to realize that, we're not just a startup company in Florida. Once they realize the technology behind it, once they see it live, they kind of like realize, oh, this is the real deal. But getting into this space was a little bit harder than we anticipated just because of that very reason that, it's very much who you are in this space. So it took a little bit getting used to, but I think we overcame it.
Well, that's awesome because in a static industry such as this scenario, it's very difficult to break through. And most of, there's a lot of facilities that are run by the state. So you got to get through those barriers. The private facilities obviously comes down to a cost thing. So you have a lot of different barriers to overcome. But as people are further exposed to what you're offering, I think they would see the value and more importantly, the operational savings for the staff and then the clinical value associated with it. So what are the responses you're getting from people, including the physicians, as they evaluate that?
Man, they vary. They only want to talk to the companies that they've already met the reps with. So they're like, we have a rep. Thanks. So they won't even talk to you, which those are always fun because, I kind of see it as a challenge.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not really, it's kind of almost about the hunt.
Yeah.
But for the ones that are open to technologies, usually like the smaller organizations that want to be able to have good results because it's very important to them to grow. So typically the organizations we're with are smaller organizations, but very well interested in implementing technology. So it's working for us.
The transparency is another way to speak to that. The smaller entities obviously have a more vested interest in who's there, and your product and technology allows very clear transparency and documentation.
Yeah.
As the industry continues to develop, I would expect you would see more of it because the families and or the people who are participating in each of these facilities should demand such a thing because
Yeah.
it's no longer a price point per se. It's just part of the process to treat.
Yep.
Yeah.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. So it's coming, as they say. The technology continues to develop and drive and really allows for scalability associated. And speaking of scalability, this is not a platform that's required to run on their local system. You bring it in and it's pretty much all cloud-based, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it was very important to us to make it hosted just because we can make sure that the HIPAA compliance is there. We're running on HIPAA compliant AWS servers. So that's very important to us, very secure. All the data sets are very encrypted. All the endpoints, everything's encrypted. And again, I'm not a developer, so that part kind of goes a little bit above my head, but I have been assured that we have the strongest level of encryption and security possible because we have to have it.
You're not the only one using AWS. I can assure you of that. They are clinically tied and regulation driven. So that's
Yeah.
for sure. So as a result of that, anyone can get on a desktop, laptop. And are they able to use their phones as well? I mean,
Yeah.
what
Yep.
level?
Android and iOS.
So it's just a matter of pulling it up and fulfilling the fields that need to be required to be
Correct.
answered and repeat.
Yep. And it all depends on the level of that the organization needs. We have anywhere from multi-unit organizations all the way down to organizations that just want 5 rooms. So we tailor the solution. That was one of the biggest things, coming from a space where, everything's like, hey, you have to adapt to the system. You have to adapt to the platform. You have to adapt to our hardware. What we built was, what do you need the system to do for you? Because there is no two identical care facilities. I don't care what anybody says. The problems that Florida's having aren't the same problems that Jersey's having, aren't the same problems that New York's having. So we need to make sure that once we go into a facility, we take the consultative approach. Like, hey, what do you guys need? What does your facility lack? What do we need to implement to get you guys to where you need to be?
You can obviously edit it on the software side, for the developer side, what you can do, but is it something that they can adjust the fields themselves too?
Yeah. So we made it at the code level, the base level of the platform. We made it to where we can adjust it however we need to. But also at the admin level for the customers, we made it to where they could go in and per user identify what fields they can see. So, because sometimes people have multiple roles in an organization. They're not just the technician. They're also the supervisor. Sometimes they're also the person that does the vitals or the drug test. So every single one of our application features has a toggle switch where we can turn it on or off per user.
I ask that because I've spent a lot of time around Epic and hospitals, and what you just described that an administrator can do is usually at least 5 figures for Epic to come in to adjust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
just to touch it, just to touch it, to toggle something on or off. So that's a huge advantage to, let alone the facility, but the system, in order to let them do what they need to do on a local level. And it sounds like you built it out that way.
Yeah, we started with the admin dashboard. So we started backwards kind of. People usually start with the main function first. We started with like, let's go back one step and see what they're going to need to see. So on our side, we have admin level reports. We have admin level configurations because they want to be able to say, hey, look, this is no longer, I mean, just by how day-to-day operations work. This is a female only room. This is a male only room. Oh, well, we got more males than females now. Let's switch that room. Those are things that they can easily jump in. Our app can switch it with a click of a button.
I haven't seen the software myself, but as you describe more about it, I'm excited to see it in action. I know that there's some screenshots and others on your website that allow people to witness it. I hope they have the opportunity to do it. As we come to the end of the Carrot Scale podcast, which these sessions always go very fast, and it always amazes me how quickly it goes. Tell me about how someone would be able to get in touch with you, have a demo, and go about that process if they so desired.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is just go to our website, patientseye.com, and request, some time to meet with me or somebody from our sales team. They can email me directly, alex@patientseye.com. We can get that ball rolling for them.
And is there anything we didn't cover in this brief conversation? Because I hope we have an opportunity to talk more about the actual actions within the software, and as it continues to develop and you have more clientele participating in it.
No, you did pretty good covering from A to Z.
That's pretty good. So, well, Alex, I really enjoyed it. I look forward to the next conversation and how we can really have not only the patients benefit, but the facilities and others that are associated with this industry and this health care system that certainly could use the support of what Patients Eye does bring to it. So thank you.
No, much appreciated. Thanks for having us.
We'll do it again soon, and I look forward to it. So
yes, sir.
All right. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Yeah.